of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah is we will discuss very briefly, literally we're just going to zoom over his teachers, his students, and some famous statements that Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala had. As far as his teachers are concerned, there are many. We are not going to be mentioning any of them. However, we will say that he began with the scholars of Mecca, and he began studying from them when he was the age of 13 years old. Then after that, one of his main teachers that he began to study with is Imam Malik rahimahullah, whom he went and he traveled to Medina. It was said that during this time, the actual rihla, or the actual journey that Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah had to go to Imam Malik, was going there to study the famous collection of ahadith that Imam Malik put together, which we talked about, entitled Al-Muwatta. And during that journey, he memorized the entire Muwatta. So when he arrived in front of Imam Malik, he told Imam Malik, said, I'm coming here and I want to study from you. So Imam Malik rahimahullah, you can say, if you want to put this in a one statement, kind of took him for granted, or underestimated who this person really was. And he says, you want to study the Muwatta? And the person said, yes, and I have memorized it. Imam al-Shafi'i said, yes, I have memorized it. So Imam Malik, okay, said, طيب, read, اقرأ, read the entire Muwatta to me. And they sat there, and Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah read the entire Muwatta to him. They began to study, and so Imam al-Shafi'i stayed with Imam Malik until his death of Imam Malik rahimahullah. So having said that, he also studied in various other parts of the Ummah, the Muslim Ummah, especially in the Arabic world. He went to Baghdad, he went to Iraq, he went to Yemen, and other places as well. One particular sheikh that he studied with, that he loved to be with, was a sheikh by the name of Muhammad ibn Hassan. Muhammad ibn Hassan, rahimahullah. This one particular sheikh loved Imam al-Shafi'i so much that the leaders and the kings of that time, he preferred to have Imam al-Shafi'i sitting with him than to sit with any other king or leader. This is how much he loved him. And this shows us how the type of student Imam al-Shafi'i was. He was a serious student. He loved to learn, just like all the A'imma. But this is the precedence that they had over other students who were studying with the same sheikh. As far as the students of Imam al-Shafi'i is concerned, like all the other A'imma that we mentioned, there are too many of them. The students of these men are too many to mention. They were situated all over the Muslim world, in Egypt, in Baghdad, in Mecca. And it's important for us to mention, because of our discussion, that one of the most important students of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah was Imam Ahmad. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah used to study with Imam al-Shafi'i so much that he himself said, I have never missed a single class of Imam al-Shafi'i. He's never missed any of his classes. And it was actually, there's a narration that says that Imam al-Shafi'i used to ride his donkey. This is what he would use for transport. And beside it, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah used to walk beside him and read to him and study from him. So this was to this extent. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said about his teacher that he never saw anything in him except good. Never saw anything in him except good. Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, when he was in Mecca, he used to teach in the famous Masjid al-Haram, which is in Mecca, as we all know. And many of his students used to say that they never thought they would ever live to see someone created like Imam Ahmad rahimahullah as a teacher. His students described him at this level. They never thought that there was a creation like this. So beautiful, so knowledgeable. It is almost as if it was so perfect. This was the level of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. More specifically, in the way he used to teach, it was said that he used to teach from Fajr till Dhuhr. approximately 6-7 hours. He used to do a lot this time to teach, and the rest of his days, the rest of the hours in his day, he would allot it for private sessions that he would have in his home, as well as private students that he would teach, and any time for his family, etc. So that, like we said, we're just going to zoom over this real quickly until we now come to some of the famous statements of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. Now, as we mentioned last week, we said that Imam al-Shafi'i was a very famous poet. The most beautiful poetry you can find is the poetry of Imam al-Shafi'i himself. He was a master in the Arabic language. And so, some of the very famous statements that he mentions follows. That he said once that whoever wants the dunya, then seek knowledge. And whoever wants the akhirah, seek knowledge. So basically, if you want both, if you want everything in this dunya that will give you a content life, seek the knowledge of al-Islam. Now, seeking the knowledge of al-Islam, this may sound like a dichotomy here, like a contradiction to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he tells us in authentic hadith that whomsoever has their ultimate goal to seek knowledge, whomever seeks knowledge, and this is their ultimate goal for the dunya, then this is all they will get. Okay, there's a hadith like this. Anybody who seeks knowledge for the sake of the dunya, then this is all they will get. What is meant here by the statement of Imam al-Shafi'i is that a student of knowledge, a person who seeks for the sake of pleasing Allah Azza wa Jal, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him live a happy and content life in this dunya wa fil akhirah, as well as in the akhirah. Allah Azza wa Jal testifies to this in Surah Al-Nahl, a very important ayah, in where He states, مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. So whomsoever does righteous deeds and believes in Allah Azza wa Jal, from the males and females, فَلَنُحْيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. Then Allah Azza wa Jal guarantees them that they will have a content life in this world. They will have a happy life in this world. And we've gone through this. And it's important for us to continue to mention this. The difference between a person whom Allah Azza wa Jal constantly tests with trials and tribulation and fitna in this, and you see the athar and the effect of all the hardship this person goes through, as opposed to the person from Ahlul Ilm, the person who is studying the knowledge, who is practicing this knowledge, and who spends his time, his day, his minutes, everything about him for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. No matter what trial comes to this person, he will always smile, he will always feel content. The dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal will always make him happy in this dunya. This is what Allah Azza wa Jal talks about in Surah Al-Ra'd when He says, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. Is it not true that the remembrance of Allah, the knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal brings contentness to the hearts? And so, this is how we understand the statement of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. If a person's akhirah, the dunya is given to him by default. By default. A person who is struggling for the akhirah, Allah Azza wa Jal guarantees them that if they struggle for the akhirah, the dunya by default will be given to them, and they will feel content with it throughout their lifetime. From the statements of Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah is he mentions that the essence of the scholars is their success. The sweetness in the scholars is their manners, and the ultimate beauty in listening to the scholars is their kindness. So three things he mentions. The essence of the scholars, meaning their presence when they are here with us, and we know that they are here to guide this ummah, as the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that they are the inheritors of the Prophet, meaning that the way they practice al-Islam, the way they preach it, the level of knowledge that they have is the closest to the prophets and the messengers sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he mentions that there's the essence of the scholars is their success. The sweetness is in their manners. So if you really want to see the sweetness of being amongst the scholars, you can do so by simply observing them. Not even necessarily going to the extent of being students of them, but simply observing them. This is how you know a scholar. You see their actions, you see their manners, and your iman increases just by this alone. You see that the way they sit, the way that they speak, the way their hand gestures are, the manner in which they speak, the level of their voice, the way they dress, the way they smell, simply all of this, just observing them, this is how you know this person, inshaAllah, is a real scholar, a real alim fil Islam, in the religion of al-Islam. And the ultimate beauty is in their kindness, meaning in their actions. What beautifies a scholar at the end of the day is that they have taken all of this knowledge that Allah Azza wa Jal has taught them, and they began to practice this knowledge. They began to illustrate this knowledge, and the entire ummah is a witness to this. This is one of the traits of a scholar. Everything that they know, they practice it. Everything that they learn, they implement it. Even tahajjud, they learn about tahajjud, they learn about the rulings of it, and they practice it. Scholars are the people of tahajjud. They wake nights, and their nights are alive with prayer. From the statements of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, and as we said to you, there are many. We will state one more. Whoever desires overtake him in the dunya, then he becomes a slave to his family. Now, what does this mean? Whoever desires overtake them in the dunya, then they become a slave to their family. This is how we understand the statement. Then whomsoever rushes and seeks the dunya and completely ignores the akhirah, completely ignores the ultimate result, the ultimate destination, then they become a slave to their family, meaning to human beings, not just to their mothers, their fathers, or children, husbands or wives, etc. But they become a slave to them, meaning just what the Prophet ﷺ tells us, that a person who makes money their qibla, who worships money, then Allah Azza wa Jal will cause this person to perish. So a person who constantly seeks the dunya and everything in it, for the sake of their families, for the sake of their friends, their community, etc., and they completely forget the akhirah, such a person will eventually perish. Now realize here, there's an important note. It is not haram to seek the dunya. It is not haram to want to live a good life. It is not haram to make money and make lots of it. This is not haram. The problem is when this becomes something that overtakes you. This is where the problem is. So when we seek money and when we seek a healthy, comfortable life in this dunya, it is each and every Muslim that they do this in a very constructive manner. They do this in a responsible manner, that they do not forget that Allah Azza wa Jal today will give us all this wealth, tomorrow may snatch it away from us, may completely erase this from us. And this is a sign of how little control we have of ourselves, how little control we have of our wealth and property and our health, etc. And coming into the second last category, and this is the sifat, or the description of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. It was said that he was very tall, very robust, a very strong person. He was a yellow person, yellow in color, so he was between white and brown, somewhere in that nature. He had an extremely beautiful voice. Some of the people who heard him speak, they said that it was very difficult for them, if they did not memorize the Quran, it was very difficult for them to differentiate between the words of Imam al-Shafi'i and the Quran, because of how beautiful his speech was and how eloquent his Arabic was. These are the people who did not know Quran and they just simply heard him speaking. Everyone would cry. It was mentioned that anybody who prayed behind Imam al-Shafi'i will be brought to tears because of his beautiful voice. He also wore a ring. It was said that he used to go... Now this is something to emphasize the strength of Imam al-Shafi'i. As far as the ring that he wore, it said that he wore it on his left hand. Which finger? I could not find anything stating on which finger he would wear it. However, he had a ring that he wore on his left hand. To emphasize his strength, it was said that Imam al-Shafi'i used to wrestle with one of his horses. And he used to take his head and take the horse's head and put it together. And he used to push like this, and the horse would back off because of the strength of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. So he used to do this for fun, for something to test his strength. He was also known to change his opinions. Now this is something that you find when you look in the books of Imam al-Shafi'i. You will find a very important statement. You will find that at times he will say qawlul qadim, this is an old opinion, wa qawlul jadid, this is a new opinion. So realize that the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i is divided into two broad categories, two general categories. There is what some scholars will title the old madhab, and some scholars will title the new madhab. So this is important that when you study this, the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i, that you realize that what was in the old madhab is not necessarily the same in what was in the new madhab. Okay, and this is one of the minhaj, or the methodology of the scholars, is that if they traveled or if they had a certain group of people to deal with, sometimes their opinions would change. And when we say change, it does not go out of the fold of al-Islam. It does not go out of this religion. For example, what is Musleh talking about here? For example, some of the scholars have made a statement and a fatwa, which you can find in the Lajnatul Da'ima, which is volumes of books of fatwa that the senior scholars of al-Islam have given. And this is continuous. This is not something that stops. It continues, and each year or each few years a volume is added on. In this collection, you find that some of the scholars, Ibn Baz, Sheikh Salih Fawzan, Abu Bakr Zayd rahmatullahi alayh, and others, they made a statement saying that women are not allowed to drive. Okay? This is a very valid fatwa that is you find in the books. Now if somebody were to take this fatwa and bring it to Canada and say women are not allowed to drive, what is going to happen? There's going to be more corruption. There's going to be more fitna. What the people don't realize is when they took this fatwa, they forgot to read the section where it said that this fatwa was only for the people of Saudi Arabia. Because in that country, women don't drive, and they have their own set of rules that are exclusive to that country. However, here, if you stop women from driving, this will eventually lead to fitna more than anything else, especially for her. Her safety will be jeopardized. As a matter of fact, some of the scholars said wajib for a woman to try her very best, that when she lives in countries where the Muslims are a minority, that she should try her very best to get a driver's license and drive. Because she is safer in her car than she is in a subway. She is safer in her car than she is if she was walking the streets, because of her attire, her nature, etc. So this is how we differentiate that sometimes the opinions of scholars, it will change from one place where they understand the people to another place where they understand that these people are different. However, at the same time, they are in the fold of al-Islam. Having said that, it was said that Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, and this is where we will conclude his life and times, is how he passed away. As far as the information that's available is concerned, it's said that he was very sick, and there were various moments in his life where he was sick and he had a problem with his... It was said that during his lifetime he would lose a lot of blood. And the reasons behind this, Allahu A'lam, we did not find much detailed information regarding this. So he had some sort of sickness with regards to his blood. He eventually passed away in Egypt, and this is where he is buried. He passed away after Maghrib in the year 204. 204, this is when Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah passed away. And just for those who weren't here with us, we mentioned that Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah was born in the year 150. Okay, now this is the same year that who died? Which Imam died in the year 150? Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So the same year that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah died is the same year that Imam al-Shafi'i was born. And this is why the scholars say, when they speak about these two great Imams, they say that at the same time we were losing an Imam, another one was being born. So this legacy of these great A'imma continued. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah was buried after Jum'ah, and he was the youngest of all the Imams, and he was 54 years old.